From California. It is Tuesday morning, 10 o'clock California time for this week's Network Planner onboarding webinar. We got a bunch of stuff to show you, a bunch of new features, and excited to be back. But we usually give folks a few minutes to join the stream live, so we're going to play about 2.5 minutes of music, and then we'll get started. If you're watching this on the replay, you can just fast forward 2.5 minutes, and that will get you to the start of our presentation. Hello there, I'm Jonathan Westerling, Manager of Special Programs for Google Spectrum Services. Welcome to this week's Network Planner onboarding webinar. We've got a lot to show you. We took September off and during that month unveiled a bunch of new features in the Network Planner. So I'm excited to include those in our demo today. But as always, the purpose of our demo is mainly to get folks started with the product. We'll give you an introduction to the Network Planner, show you the correct project settings to use for CBRS if you're a Google SaaS customer. And we'll also build and evaluate a complete citywide network. I'll show you some special tools, HAR and auto planning, as well as our export coverage feature, which is something that was new in August. But along the way, we'll discover a couple of little things that have been added to the user interface. And I'll include those as best I can. Obviously, if you have questions, you can pop them into the chat here on YouTube. That's the best way to ask questions. I do try to answer the questions as we go, but I'm balancing that with the fact that we have a lot to cover this session. So ask questions if you have them, but in the meantime, appreciate your understanding if we have to power forward through all of these things that we need to get to this hour. If you've never used chat on YouTube, the first time you try to type something in, it will ask you to do what's called create a channel. Don't worry, it's just asking you for a name, and you put that name in, and then you can ask questions in the chat. So I'm going to do some clicking here, and we're going to switch to the Network Planner. Sometimes that takes a little bit of my CPU power. So I'm going to give that over to the main screen. There it is. Hopefully you're seeing this as well. You can log into the Network Planner and follow along if you would like. If it's your first time using the Network Planner, you'll see a button that says New Projects here in the middle. If it's not your first time, you'll see View Projects. So we're going to click on the View Projects button and get on into the Network Planner. This is our project library. This is what we first see when we log in if we're not going to a specific URL that has been shared with you. So we've got on the left-hand side the organizations. Usually you just have your organization on the left-hand side. If somebody from some other company or organization has shared a project with you, you'll see their company appear here on the left. But in the middle is where all of your projects are. I've only got one project here set up in the middle, October 5th for today, but you can have as many projects as you'd like here in the middle. I click on October 5th, click the Open button here, and we'll get started. It's going to pop us to Little Rock, Arkansas, where we do our demos. This is a demonstration network. It's not a real network. But I encourage you to either follow along. You can build a network wherever you are, or you can go to Little Rock. The way to get to Little Rock is you click on this little toggle search button, the magnifying glass here at the top of the screen, and then type in Little Rock in Google Maps, and it will autocomplete, and then you can get to Little Rock. Now, before I get to what all this stuff is here on the screen, let's get a basic layout of the Google Network Planner. So in the middle, Google Maps, hopefully familiar to you, with all of the features and functions that you normally find in a Google Maps view. But we've added on top of that a bunch of stuff for radio wave propagation, and that is what is the Network Planner. So on the left-hand side, we've got a list of all of our sites. On the far left, some buttons. I'll show you what those do as part of our presentation today. Along the top, we've got some additional buttons that I'll show you for doing specific things within the tool. And on the right-hand side, we have our details column, which is going to show us about the information about what it is that we're doing, or what the thing that we're working with. We're going to configure and do most of our work over there on the far right-hand side of the screen. So the first thing we need to do is check our project settings. And I do take 5 minutes at the beginning of before we even dive into any of the usability of the product, to go through the project settings. Because first of all, some things have changed. If you're watching this and you've used the Network Planner in the past and you're back here rewatching this video because you're trying to figure out what some new things are, well, let me show you that. And by the way, I'll show you as part of the demonstration how to access our Help Center, because all the features of the Network Planner are documented in the Google Help Center as well. So you can find the information there. But if you like webinar style learning, well, you're in the right place. We're going to go through that right now. I'm going to click on that sprocket here in the lower left-hand side of the screen, and that brings up the project settings on the right-hand side. Now, the first thing we need to look at with the project settings, and I'm talking kind of fast here. I hope that's all right with everybody. I've got a lot to go through, and I want to make sure we go through everything. So stop me if there's something that actually, you know what? If you didn't understand something, you can always rewind. This live stream is rewindable, so you can just click in the live stream and rewind if you want to rewatch something, if you didn't quite understand it, if it went a little quick. So you can do that. You can also rewatch this webinar all week long at that same URL, so you can rewatch it anytime. So you don't necessarily have to stop me if you need something re-explained. You'll be able to go back and look at it again later. But appreciate your understanding as I try to power through a bunch of things fairly quickly here. So this lock button in the upper right-hand corner of the screen is how you can lock your project settings. And this is really important for if you want to avoid accidental changes or what have you. But if you want to make changes, make sure this little lock button is unlocked here. And the first thing we can do is we can name our project, and then give it some additional language here in the description if you want to further describe what it is that you're modeling. So that's the basic naming a project. Underneath that, we can share projects. As I mentioned in the project library, you can share projects with other people. The way to do that, super easy. Click on this little plus button here, type in their email address here, and then you can select whether you want this person you're sharing with to be an owner or a viewer. Here's my first big important point for the Network Planner. You can only have one owner per project. So if you make someone else an owner of the project, you're delegating that project over to them. You'll no longer be able to make changes. Now, there's a workaround for that, and I'll show you that in just a second. But in the basic concept here is, if you're going to share a project with someone, make them a viewer. Then click the share button, and it will send them an email with a link to the project, and the project will appear in their project library. Now, going back to that project library, what we saw at the beginning, first thing we saw when we logged in. How do you get there again? It's hidden. This is another sort of pro tip. It's you don't have to go mess around with the URL. You can actually get to the project library anytime you want. It's under the beta logo up here. So if you go in the upper left-hand corner of the screen, you can click on that beta button there, and that's actually what gets you into the project library. So now you've got another pro tip. That's a little hidden feature. So when we look at this project library here, I mentioned that there are projects that are shared with me over here. And so these projects were shared from another organization. And what I can do if I want to make changes, if I just open up this project, I'm not going to be able to make any changes because I'm just a viewer on that project. But if I want to make a change to a project that someone else shared with me, I can right-click on that project here in the project link and then duplicate that project to my organization. And what that's going to do is it's sort of like a save as. It's going to copy the project into my company, my organization, and then I'm going to be the owner of that project. So if somebody shares a project with you, you want to make a change to it, you want to try something out with it, duplicate it to your own organization, and then you'll be able to open it up and you'll be the owner of that. So that's how that works. We'll close this up. We'll get back to the project settings. For those of you who may have lost me along the way, project settings are available here using the sprocket in the lower left-hand corner. Okay, so we've gone through the project sharing. The next thing we do is also really important. It's what type of wireless system are we modeling? And we have a drop down here where we can choose either fixed wireless or mobility. The mobility is divided into either small cells or macro. And the difference there is a macro cell is going to be bigger, it's going to cover more area, and so this would be like a cell phone, traditional cell phone company would be a mobility macro, right? Big antennas on top of tall towers covering a large area. Mobility small cell would be what you'd find in a more urban area, smaller deployments, lower down to the ground with lower power. Now, why would you choose one over the other? Because as you'll see, we can actually decide how far we want the propagation to go. But the answer here is a technical one, and it's something called ray tracing. So the only difference if you choose mobility macro, well, the main difference between choosing mobility macro and mobility small cells is you want to choose the small cells if you are in fact deploying in a dense urban environment, like a downtown area, and you're doing a mobility network. That is a cellular type network with mobile end users. If you're doing that in a dense urban area, choose the small cells and you'll get the benefit of additional ray tracing features within our G-wave propagation model. I'll talk more about the propagation model later in the presentation. And you can ask questions about it in the chat if you'd like. But in the meantime, we're actually going to do a fixed wireless network today because it's a little bit easier, more straightforward to demonstrate. So I'm going to choose fixed wireless for our demo today. Now, the next thing is just whether you want to see miles or kilometers. If you're a Google SaaS customer, you might already know that kilometers is standard for SaaS. It's also the standard scientific way to measure things for radio wave engineers. So we're going to leave things in metric here, but if you prefer miles, you can just select US. Now, we get to the first really new thing. This is something that didn't exist the last time I did this webinar, and it's called multiband. So we now let you model multiple bands in the same project. You don't have to create separate projects for different bands now in the network planner. And the way you do that is you can just simply click this plus button and it will add a band to your deployment. Now, you notice I've got a CBRS band here. And then earlier today, I actually clicked the plus button and I added a second one here. So let me show you why you might want to do that. If I click on one band, it'll bring up the project, the settings for this particular band. And this is what we saw before. This is standard. This is what we had seen before as the thresholds for the band, the CBRS band, or whatever band we chose. But now we can choose multiple bands. So I'll get into that in just a second. Let's go through the settings that you can choose in specific bands. First of all, you choose whether or not you're using LTE technology or some other technology. If you choose the custom technology, you'll notice I can select the frequency, the start and the end frequency for for this particular band that I'm modeling. So, for example, this is 3575 to 3725. That's a bit much. Let's do 3550. Whoops. To 3560, for example, if I wanted to do this band. Now, this would be a 3.5 gigahertz band that's only 10 megahertz wide. We could also make this 5.8 gigahertz. Oh, sorry, it's in megahertz, so 5,800 megahertz, and we can go to 5,900 megahertz. This is 100 megahertz wide, 5.8 gigahertz Wi-Fi. So you can choose and type in any frequency you want when you're using the custom technology here. That means you can do Wi-Fi, you can do all sorts of, you can do C-band, you can choose whatever frequencies you want. So if you're not using CBRS, you can choose the custom and type in whatever frequencies you want. On the other hand, we can go back to LTE, and you get the pull-down menu with all the LTE bands that we support, all the way from 600 megahertz all the way up to and beyond 3.5 gigahertz. So these are all the bands, and what I'm going to choose here is the CBRS band, because the CBRS band is what Google SaaS customers use, and presumably you're watching this because you're a Google SaaS customer, so we're going to customize this demonstration here to CBRS. So I choose the CBRS band, and TDD frame configuration. I prefer frame configuration 4 for a little more upload speed. And the last thing we get to do when we're choosing our frequencies here is the resolution that we're going to model at. And I see your question, David. I'll be with you in just a second. We choose the resolution for the propagation and the radius for the propagation. Now, these are also things that were just introduced this summer in the Network Planner. It's a little bit complicated, so bear with me as I explain to you at a sort of a top level how this works. The resolution is the number of dots per mile, we'll call it, or dots per dots per mile, dots per kilometer that you're going to see on the screen. The lower the number, the more dots, the higher the resolution is that the Network Planner is going to predict your coverage. So you're going to be able to see a greater level of detail in the map if you choose a lower number. But there's a trade-off here. Okay, we'll get to that trade-off in just a second. The other thing we get to choose is the radius, the propagation radius. And so here we've got 16 kilometers. This is the distance from the transmitter that we're going to see for each transmitter's coverage or each antenna's coverage. So we can choose the distance from the transmitter and the resolution from each of our transmitters. This is effective for all transmitters that we're going to see. Now, why wouldn't we just choose super high resolution, 1 meter, we're going to have 1 dot every 1 meter, and we're going to dial up this, oh, wait a minute, look at that. It bumped my radius down to 2 kilometers. That's the trade-off we talked about. You can't have a super big radius and a super fine resolution. All right, there's a trade-off, because if you were to choose a 1 meter resolution over like 100 kilometers, it would take a long time to predict the coverage. So the Network Planner has some built-in limits that let us limit the settings that we're choosing here. And I found, at least for this demonstration, we're going to choose 8 meter propagation resolution. Actually, we're going to do 4 meters. Let's do 4 meters resolution, and then we're going to dial this up to something a little bit higher here. We're going to do 8 kilometers for the radius. So if the higher number that I choose here, the lower the resolution, the further away from the transmitter I can choose in my propagation radius. And that's the trade-off here. In the meantime, know that we give you a good default value when you first log in and use the Network Planner. So if you don't feel comfortable messing with these, just go ahead and leave them at the default. Or if you want to, you can start playing around, make your propagation a little more, more fine, or you can dial up the radius if you want to go further, model further distance from your transmitters. Remember, if you're maxing out on your radius, you're going to need to decrease the resolution here, make the number higher if you want to go further from the transmitters. And that's the trade-off there in propagation. I'll take a break from that, go to David's question. Can I set up the same exact band multiple times to model multiple types of user equipment, user antennas on a single project? David, you're getting ahead of me. It's a great question. I'm going to get to why you would choose multiple bands in just a second, and then I'll see if that addresses your question. So great question. Hang on just a sec while we get to that. I'm going to keep going through these settings here in a specific band. Maybe you'll see your questions starting to become answered here. The channel configuration here, because we're in CBRS, I'm going to choose the standard 10 megahertz channel configuration. That gives me 15 channels to work with here in CBRS. For the user equipment, this is the end user equipment for our fixed wireless network that we're modeling today. My user equipment, I'm going to choose the noise figure here in this particular band of 6 dB, 130. These are good standard default values, and then we support MIMO up to 4x4. If your device supports it, you're going to dial this in depending on what your end user device is going to be for this particular band that we're modeling here. The next thing is the user antenna. We choose in this case, it's set by default to isotropic. We're going to use a sector antenna here because we're doing point-to-point networks. And so we expect our user antenna, that is the antenna on our user device, to be a sector, a directional antenna here in fixed wireless. And then we can choose the height of this antenna. Now you'll notice here, before we get into the world of antennas, which I'm going to dive into in just a second, we can choose 2 different heights for our user antenna. The height AGL above ground level, or the height above the roof. Now, why do we have to choose 2 different heights for antenna? Our antenna is only going to be at one height, right? Not necessarily. Because another key important thing to remember here is that Google Maps, because we've layered the network planner on top of the amazing data at our friends over at Google Maps have put together, Google Maps knows when there's a building at a location. And so when you're using the network planner in fixed wireless mode, if there's a building in a particular place, it's going to model that propagation for this height, the height above the roof. And in this case, for my model wireless network, I'm going to select 1 meter as the height above the rooftop because if I'm installing a UE on a roof, I'm going to use a 1 meter pole. On the other hand, if my UE is on a ground-mounted pole, my ground-mounted poles are actually 6 feet tall. So I'm going to do 2 meters for my AGL, 1 meter above the roof. What that means is when I'm looking at my coverage on the map, I'm actually going to be seeing, for any particular pixel, it's going to be showing me the height of that antenna, whether or not there's a building on that pixel. So if there's a building at that pixel, it's going to use 1 meter height for the UE height. If there's no buildings, then it's going to assume I'm putting a pole in the ground, and it's going to use a 2 meter height. So that's the power of just a little bit of the power of the network planner here. We mentioned antennas, and I think it's really important because antennas are an important part of wireless networking that we dive really quickly into how antennas work in the network planner. So give me another 5 minutes to do that, and then we'll get started on building our network. So antennas are available here on the left-hand side of the screen in the View Antennas button. This is also something that has changed slightly. There's no more antenna browser. We used to have an antenna browser, and now that's all built right into the user interface on the main screen. Pardon me as I take sips of water during the presentation here, doing a lot of talking. Okay, so thanks for sticking with me. Into the world of antennas we go. We clicked on antennas on the left-hand side, and I've got my list of antennas here. If I click on an antenna, I see all the information about that antenna in the right-hand side of the screen. If it's a multi-band antenna, I can choose the pull down to see what the pattern is for each band. For my sector antenna, you can see here, this is a theoretical antenna, right? This is a demo antenna, and we're just going to use that for our demo today. It's a directional antenna. It's pointing in one particular direction. We can see that from the polar plot here. Now, if you have specific antennas that you want to use in the network planner, that is a totally reasonable request. And so let me show you how that works. With the network planner onboarding email that you got as a user of the network planner, you should have gotten a link to our antenna database. So that's a Google Drive folder that has a bunch of antennas in it. And you can just click on that link, bring up that drive folder, and then it will show you the antennas which are available to you in the network planner. So I'll bring up my little picture because we're going to dive into something that requires a bit of explanation. So way number one to get your antennas into the network planner, click on that Google Drive folder and and look for antennas that are similar to the ones that you're using. Basically, a bunch of vendors, equipment manufacturers have given us their antenna patterns. We put it in that Google Drive folder. You can download them. They're CSV files, comma separated value files. You can download them and then import them into the Network Planner. I'll show you how to do that in just a second. If you need the link to our antenna library, contact our support department, networkplanner-support@google.com. I'll repeat that many times during our webinar here. So, but you'll probably want to take note of that. And they can give you the link to our antenna file, our antenna folder in Google Drive. Now, if you want to customize your antenna, if your devices use antennas that are not available in that Drive folder, do not worry. You can also customize your antennas in the Network Planner, and here's how that works. At the top of the screen, you have an import button. And we're not going to import just yet. We're actually going to look at these templates here that are right underneath. So we see one of those is the antennas template. So you click on the antennas template, and that will download a template for an antenna in the Network Planner. It looks like this. Here's the antennas template. You open it up in your favorite program, spreadsheet program like Google Sheets, and it will bring up all of the information in that CSV file. The rubber meets the road here in row number 5, where you put in the name of the antenna, the frequencies, and all sorts of information here. We've put some default values in here, and then here's where you enter in the pattern information. That is the polar plot information for the horizontal and the vertical, the elevation of the azimuth for your antenna for all 360 degrees. Now, if you're not a power antenna user, don't tune out. I haven't lost you. Give me just a second to explain at a top level. One other power user tip for people who are customizing the antenna: you save the information in this file as the CSV and then import that into the Network Planner, just like you'd import one of those files that you downloaded from our Drive folder. The power user tip here is you don't need all 360 degrees of information. So if you only have if your antenna manufacturer has only given you information about the antenna for every 10 degrees, let's say, just leave the rest empty, and the Network Planner will interpolate the missing information there. So you don't have to, if you're doing a custom antenna, don't have to do all 360 degrees. Put in the information you have. The Network Planner will interpolate that and then show it to you in the polar plots. Okay, we've done with all that. How do we import our antennas now into the Network Planner? We go to the import button where we were before, select import from computer, and that brings up this little, your selector here in your computer, and then you can download the antennas template, which I think is, I'm not seeing it here because here it is. I've saved them as generic sector or generic isotropic. You simply select the CSV file, then select open, and it will import that antenna into your antennas library. It will appear here on the left-hand side of the screen, and you'll have access to those antennas. Phew, okay, that was antennas in the Network Planner. Thank you for bearing with me. It is an important part of wireless networking. If you're one of those people who wants to get things really, really precise, it's important to have that antenna information in your Network Planner. So I'm going to hide my little picture-in-picture here, and we're going to get back into building our network. We're about halfway through the show. If you've joined us along the way, you can rewatch this video anytime during the week in our YouTube library. The Google Network Planner has a library of presentations, YouTube videos that you can with information about the product. You can also check out our Google SaaS YouTube library as well, with lots of webinars there. Okay, let's build I forgot to answer David's question. David, I didn't forget about you here. The answer to your question is yes. That's exactly why you would have the exact band multiple times. So let me go back to my project settings over here, and then show you that, in fact, yes, if you click the plus button here, I've added the second band another time, and if I wanted to, I could choose a different antenna for this particular band, or I could choose a different band altogether if I wanted to model band 49, right? Choose another band, and then when you run your propagation, it will do the propagation for both of those bands. Let me see if maybe I just didn't click save. So I'm going to have to, I'm not going to do this. It's warning me if you change something about a band, the network planner is going to make some changes to existing devices. And band-related fields on those devices will be locked during the update. So I'm not actually going to run that update right now. I'm not going to make my change that I just showed you. I'm going to click cancel here. But the main reason I'm doing that is so I can make changes if I need to during this webinar. If you want to obviously change your band or change your user equipment, you can go ahead and do that and then click OK, and it will the network planner will take a few minutes to make some changes in the back end before you can go ahead and make any additional changes. So I'm going to not do that for right now. But in the meantime, yes. David, the answer to your question is yes, and you asked a great question. That's why you would choose multiple bands, because you'd want to model different types of user equipment or antennas. So great question, David. Thanks for joining us live here and for sticking with me there as we dove into the world of antennas. Okay, let's build our network here. What we've got here is our the city of Little Rock, Arkansas, and I'm going to zoom into the airport, which is easy to find because it's just east of downtown. And we're going to build our first site here at the airport. The way we're going to do that is we're going to place a site by either right-clicking. There's tons of right-click functionality in the network planner. So you can right-click and then select Add Site, and it will pop a new site here onto the map. The other way you can do it is using the Add Site button here at the top of the screen, which will add a site wherever you click on the map if you want to prefer to work that way. So we're creating a new site. I'm going to call this airport site because I'm not very imaginative. And we're going to see that it gives us the latitude and longitude, and then lets us enable or disable a site. If we disable a site, it is not included in the propagation prediction. So it won't run any of the propagation studies or predictions for that particular site. So if a site's off the air or if it's not built yet, you can just disable it. It'll still show up in the map, but it won't be, the coverage from that site will not be included. This airport site, though, we're going to enable because we want to actually see the information for this site. So this is another one of those big picture if you're one of those folks watching this who's sort of new to network planning, you've never really done this before, here's the other big picture concept that you need to master, and that is that a site has nothing added. It is simply a latitude and longitude. It is a place where you're going to, it is an empty tower, if you will. It is a place where you will, at some point, put transmitters and antennas. But just by placing a site somewhere doesn't mean that there's any information here. And that's why I've got nothing here to show me what's at that site in terms of the power or the antennas or anything like that. None of that's here yet. If you want to, you can click the plus button and add a device at the site. Now, a device is actually what's doing the transmitting. It's actually what has the antennas and the RF power. So if you want to have a device and actually have it transmitting, have it show up in your network planner predictions, you actually need to have at least one device at that site. So you click the little plus button, it pops up this device here. We're going to name this device and give it some power. We can choose which band we want this device to serve. In this case, I remember I've got two because I'm showing, as David suggested, I'm showing different types of users and user antennas. So in this case, I'm just going to leave it set to the first one. Miscellaneous loss would be for things like lightning arresters or cables, beamforming gain if your device supports it. You'll notice, by the way, all these little helpful cards that are popping up. Whenever you see a term with an underline, you can actually hover over that with your mouse and or your cursor, and then it will give you the information about that setting. That's one easy, quick way to find out more about all of these settings in the network planner. So for this particular transmitter here at the airport, we've got a sector antenna. You notice when I change to a sector antenna, it's changing the user interface. It's changing that from a circle, an omnidirectional antenna, to a sector, a directional antenna. And I can actually aim that antenna if I want to just by clicking here and moving it around on the map. Or I can create the specifics here in the pull downs. I can choose the height up the pole of that antenna. We're going to give it 8 meters height because we're here at the airport at the, we'll pretend we're on the control tower here. The azimuth is the direction that antenna is pointing, so we're going to make it 90 degrees, facing due east. And then the down tilt is any down tilt. Since we're flat here at the airport, I'm going to give it just a little bit of down tilt. And then you'll notice we can choose the CBRS channels that we're modeling here that is supported by this device if you want to model specific channels. Won't get too much into that here, but in essence, you can turn on additional channels. And this helps you if you want to more accurately model your deployment in Google SaaS. Now, I'll mention as a caveat, there's no direct connection between Google SaaS and the Network Planner. The Network Planner is theoretical only, right? It's not a real deployment. You're just modeling the way that you're modeling potential changes or maybe a future deployment, a future network that you're going to deploy, or maybe some changes to your network. Whereas Google SaaS is all real time. It's real. It's what you're actually using in real time. So the Network Planner is like your crystal ball, right? It's going to be just showing you future or theoretical changes to your network, and that's the difference there between SaaS and Network Planner. So we got a couple of other things here. You'll notice that we give you the CBRS coverage, CBRS spectrum availability for Little Rock. We've got full channels available here in Little Rock. If you were closer to the coast or near a military installation or something, there might be some limitations. We give you those at a glance so you can customize what your power is. In this case, we've got full power available, so that's all good for this particular eNode B. And we've configured our first transmitter here in Little Rock, and we could, if we wanted to, go ahead and model what the coverage from this would look like, and we'd probably see a lot of coverage over here because it's a directional antenna pointing in this direction. But what I want to do first is I want to show you how to deploy things faster, because one thing we get from a lot of people here who are using the Network Planner is they want to actually speed up their workflow, right? So let me show you some ways to do that. Here's some tricks to speed up your deployments. If you've got a site with a device in it and you want to you're the type of operator who uses a lot of the same type of equipment, right? You're going to put the same thing on a tower pointed in 3 different directions. That same device. Well, here's an easy, quick way to do that. I've got my fast eNode B here. I'm going to use the 3-dot menu at the top of the right-hand column, and I'm going to duplicate that device. When I duplicate the device, it essentially hangs an equivalent of my first device on that same column, on that same tower at the same height. So I've now got an exact replica of the first device, which saves me from having to put all this stuff in if I had already put it in. So that's great. It's a nice little shortcut, but probably you don't want an exact replica pointing in the same direction. You probably want it pointing a different direction. So we'll change the azimuth here from 90 to 70. And now you'll see I've got my exact same fast eNode B pointing in the other direction. So that's how you add a device onto the same tower really quickly if you want to make a copy of the first device. Now, let's say I want to make a copy of an entire tower. I've got this east-west tower, and I'm going to deploy that somewhere else. I can simply copy this tower, this entire tower, by right-clicking and copy the site. That is the site with both devices on it. Now I can scroll somewhere else on the map. I'm going to go over here to Faulkner Lake, where I happen to need a tower. So I've got my default tower. I'm just going to paste the site right over here. And here's a copy of my airport site right here near Faulkner Lake. I don't want to call it airport site anymore because it's not near the airport. Just rename it. And then I can point the antennas in a different direction just by going to each one, changing the azimuth. And now I've got an exact replica of my airport site at Faulkner Lake in, under 15 seconds just by copy-pasting that site. So that's how you can be super fast with Network Planner if you want to put a Network Planner, a network together really quickly. Here's a way to be even faster than that. If you want to add a bunch of devices at the same time, if you were eagle-eyed and had joined earlier in the presentation, when I was showing you the templates, and we downloaded this antennas template before, you notice there's a sites template as well. And you can use this sites template, this CSV file, download it, and then do the same thing we did with the antennas, right? Open it up in your spreadsheet program and program in your sites for your network. We've given you a demo site, and you can just fill in all the information for your site and then import that into the network planner. I want to show you how that works a little bit because it's a little bit differently. If you import a CSV file with a bunch of sites in it, it's going to do this. It pulls me into this window here, which is where I map the tables in the CSV file to the network planner. Now I'm showing you this because maybe you're not using the template that the network planner gave you. Maybe you've got a template of sites from some other software, or that you've got put together from some other spreadsheet that you already put together before you're using the network planner. In that case, this window here lets you change the label in the file, that is the label for each column, and match it to the property in the network planner. These are all the properties that are required for your sites. In this case, you'll see that the matching is pretty much one-on-one because we've used the network planner template to create our CSV file. The one thing we didn't get into here is tags. Tags is just sort of like a little additional descriptor that you can put on a site, and I'll show you where that comes in just a second. So once you've mapped everything in your CSV file to the property in the network planner, you just click upload and it'll upload all your sites. In this case, I've already done that. These are the 23 sites that we have in our Little Rock deployment here for this demo. Now, on the left-hand side, you'll notice I've got these buttons. One of them is viewing the sites. We had switched to antennas before. If I click back on sites, you'll see now I'm seeing all 23 sites, plus the 2 that we added here to the east, giving us a total of 25 sites. One of the things I can do when I'm in sites mode is I can change now, and I can view all my sites as a table. When I do that, it lets me see all of the sites. And one of the things I can do is actually see the tags here. So if I use the tags to classify my sites, I can then use that here in the table mode as another way to search for or sort my sites. That's a more advanced thing. If you want to have an additional way of grouping your sites together, you can use tags to do that. And then you can leverage that in the table view here. Also note that you can view the table by sites or by devices. By default, I misspoke just a little bit. We were looking at devices there first, but you can also show it by sites as well. That's table view. I'm going to go back to map view because it's a little more pretty, and it's the default view for Network Planner. So we've imported all these sites. We are at 10:43. I'm woefully behind schedule, but I'm going to go ahead and run the study layers for this particular project, and we're going to hope that that gets completed here before the end of our demo. Let me show you a couple of other important things about the user interface before we get into coverage layers. I'm going to zoom in here, and I'm going to click on the map and show you a particular feature of the Network Planner, a couple of features of our user interface. So if I click here in this park, you'll notice I get this little orange marker, and on the right-hand side, I get tons of information about that particular place in the world. I get the latitude and longitude, the elevation above sea level, if there's any clutter, that is buildings or trees, what the clutter height is. I'm in open space because I'm in a park, obviously. And it's showing me the information for the last coverage run that was run on this project. Shows me the nearest sites, the best sites to cover those this particular location in the world, but I'm also seeing these cool lines here. Now, these lines are really helpful for many wireless engineers because it's showing us the line of sight propagation. It's showing me whether or not my sites, my antennas that I put into the Network Planner, are line of sight to my this point where I clicked. And you'll notice that one of these is red. Obviously, green means perfectly line of sight. Yellow means partially obstructed, and then red here is totally obstructed. So this gives me a chance to show you what's called the path profile. In this case, I can see that my point here, even though this is the closest antenna, I've got some obstruction between this point and my closest antenna. if I click on this red line, it's going to dump me into path profile mode. Path profile mode is also available here at the top of the screen using this little mountain icon. I can increase the size of the path profile window, part of the window, if I just drag and drop the user interface here. So now I'm seeing the path that the radio waves take from here in the park over to my antenna here. And if you'll notice, if you've got a good resolution on your YouTube stream, you'll actually see that as I move my cursor back and forth, there's a little black dot that's going back and forth and showing me where on the map my cursor is. And you'll notice here, I have a problem. There's a big old tree in the park, right at the edge of the park, that's obstructing my my signal. And if I click and drag and highlight that over that tree, it shows me the outline of that tree, probably a group of trees here that are going to obstruct my signal if I'm trying to deploy here. Double click in the path profile window, it zooms me back out again. So I can see that even though if I wanted to put a user device here, even though it's closest to this antenna here, I'm actually going to want to point to this antenna here. What is the compass heading for that antenna? Well, I can easily see that if I go back out of path profile mode. It's going to give me the nearest, it's going to give me the nearest site, but actually the best site is East 4th and Cumberland. Here's East 4th and Cumberland at 272 degrees. So if I wanted to make a direct connection here, I point my antenna at 272 degrees, and I will be pointing at the best tower for this particular place. That's how line of sight works. One other cool thing you can do is we can highlight the power of how precise this is. And to do that, I'm going to show you ways to, in this case, I just clicked in the park, right? I was just clicking randomly in the park. You can choose where to put this little orange dot very specifically by typing in a street address, if you want to, here in the search field. Or in this case, I'm going to type in a business name, which is called Custom Trophies. I don't know anything about Custom Trophies other than they provide a really good demonstration for me here in this webinar. And when I click on Custom Trophies, it moves my little orange place marker to this business. Let's say I wanted to provide coverage at this particular business. Now you'll notice it moved my place marker here, and I've got a problem. Because all of my line of sight lines here are red. Everything, all my 5 closest sites to this particular business are obstructed when the antenna is here. And this lets me show you the power of the network planner. Now, the resolution of our geodata in the network planner is really, really high, better than most tools, even by default. And that's because our Google Maps geodata is 1 meter accuracy in dense urban areas. So in this case, we're in Little Rock, Arkansas, and we can see that we're given the height of this building. Here's Custom Trophies building, 4.86 meters tall. I know the height of this building actually to the centimeter level here. That's how precise the network planner is going to give me information. Now watch what happens when I leverage the preciseness of that information. I'm going to move this antenna slightly to the other part of the building. And when I move it to the north side of the building, you'll see I'm no longer obstructed and I can provide service to this particular customer. So Custom Trophies is in lock. I can provide service here. How do I know that that's correct? Well, let me click on the satellite view button here and we'll see why. Along Main Street, we've got a bunch of trees. So when, by default, the network planner placed the place marker here at the front of the building, I was blocked completely by trees. There's probably some more trees over here, if I remember correctly. Yeah. So these trees were also blocking me. So just by moving slightly the location of the antenna, the user antenna on the rooftop, I can now realize that I get coverage to this particular business. So you can move this around. You can literally experiment meter by meter on a rooftop without having to make a site visit, without having to do any measurements or even pop into Google Earth. Because, by the way, you may have noticed we've got Pegman here. Pegman's the name of this little icon. If you click on Pegman, you can see that we provide you street view imagery as well here in the network planner. So you don't even have to get out of this. We don't even have to go into Google Earth anymore. We can use the Street View right within Network Planner. So that's another handy pro tip. 15 minutes left, still a lot of stuff to go through. If you've got questions, you can pop them into the chat. I will try to get to them before the end of our presentation. Now, if you noticed, we did get a coverage alert when we were doing the user interface stuff here. So there are some coverage layers available to me. I'm going to go ahead and use those and show you. I'm going to zoom way out here, and we're going to look at the various coverage layers that are available in the Network Planner. So in the Select Coverage button, this is different. This has changed in the last month. Instead of seeing just each of the coverage layers that are available, now I see a date and time for each band. So one of the bands, you remember we got two bands here because to answer David's question, we added another band. I was going to do that anyway, but I'll give you credit, David. And so we've calculated the coverage for one of those bands, and that's already available to us here. So I see the date and time that coverage completed, and I can choose from each of these industry standard types of coverage for the band. RSRQ, RSRP, let's look at RSRP real quick. And here we see the RSRP coverage for the network that we put together, and it includes the coverage from these two new sites that we put in here. Now, if I want to change the colors or the overlay, the coverage overlay, I hover over the legend here in the upper right-hand corner of the screen, and I can click the Edit button. That changes the right-hand column over to let me add changes to the color scheme. Excuse me. Now I can change the color scheme to something more colorful. I can invert the highest and lowest signal ranges, and most importantly, I can dial up or down the coverage opacity. That is, how much of the underlying map do we see underneath that coverage layer. Below that, we can even customize each of the total range of colors that are shown. And this is all updating in real time, by the way. There's no recalculation that has to happen. If I want to make my minimum signal range in dBm 110 instead of 100, I simply just make that change, and voila, it's showing me that on the map with that additional lower level of coverage closer to the noise threshold. You can dial up or down the number of buckets. That is the number of colors that you're seeing on the map. You can have more or less if you want to refine the number of bins that are being shown. We can also customize those bins. If you want to show specific coverage layers, you click on the Custom button and then simply hand code the specific signal layer level that you want to show for this bin. The other thing you can do is click on the color and customize the color if you want to show a specific color for that particular bin. So if I go back to less buckets, this will provide a little bit of a better demonstration because I can customize one of these colors and make it something gregarious. And now we can really see all the places where the signal is actually between -85 and -97.5. So I've showed you functionally how you can change the colors and the signal thresholds, but we probably don't actually want to do any of those because that's really ugly. And we want to go back to something that's more straightforward. So we'll do that here. Show you that we have a couple of other different types of coverage that we can look at, including this one here, which is a little bit different, LOS clearance. We can see whether or not a site is line of sight, we can see whether or not a point on the map is line of sight to any one of our transmitters. And this is handy if you're choosing if you're looking at the effectiveness of your particular deployments. If you've got a particular place where there's not a lot of line of sight coverage, here we can actually see the tops of each of the rooftops where we are providing where we're able to provide line of sight coverage downtown, and we may be able to see areas which need improvement. Here you can actually see the sports stadium downtown. I'm sorry, I don't remember the name of it, but that's the dome downtown, and obviously big dome, big open space, and that's got a lot of line of sight to any number of places. So that's the line of sight layer in our coverage overlays. David asked another question. How often is Google Maps geodata height updated to reflect changes in the built and natural environment? Again, great question, David. Glad you joined us today. Thanks for those great questions. I can't commit to specific, occasions when they update Google Maps geodata. But I'm pretty much sure that I'm allowed to say that Google has a fleet of planes and satellites and all sorts of other technology. I don't actually know a heck of a lot about this, but I am told that Google flies these planes constantly. So U.S. is a big place. There's a limited number of planes, but suffice to say, the data is constantly being updated because not just Network Planner, like a lot of other tools rely on this information, right? So the Maps team has an incentive to keep that data updated. Now, we do update it more often in major metropolitan areas. And also, as I said, the geodata can be less than 1 meter if you get in the middle of a desert somewhere, for example. So we're not going to fly planes or go update that geodata very often because cactuses don't grow that fast. But in major metropolitan areas where changes happen more frequently, yes, this data is updated frequently, and Google does it fairly frequently. I'll say this, if you find something that's not updated in the geodata, you can flag that for us. Let me show you how to do that now, since it's something I was going to get to before the end of the presentation. Anyway, this question mark here at the upper right-hand side of the screen has a couple of things. First of all, it has our help information from the Google Help Center, support.google.com. You can go to support.google.com, or you can just search right within the Network Planner and look at these articles about the Network Planner and how to use it. You can click this button to browse all the articles, but here's what I wanted to actually show you, this Send Feedback button here. If you click the Send Feedback button, it lets you actually sort of like submit a bug to us. Now, you can type in missing geodata for new building, etc. And then you can highlight where that building is using this particular, using the highlight tool. When you click send, that sends a little bug to our product team, which lets us know about the missing geodata, and then we can ping the Maps team, and hopefully they'll prioritize ingesting that geodata, or we can see if actually new data exists. So there's things we can do if geodata is missing in your particular metropolitan area to try to get it updated. We're not going to make any firm commitments there, but you should let us know if you notice that. The difference here, by the way, you're sending this feedback. When you send feedback to us, it doesn't necessarily mean you're going to get something in return, right? So sending feedback is like a bug or something you notice that used to work and now doesn't work before. I mean, we do QA this tool a lot before we send it out, but sometimes things fall through the cracks. You can let us know. There's hundreds of people using the Network Planner at any one time. But we do appreciate all your bug reports. If you need a response from our support department, if you want us to get back to you, you can send an email to networkplanner-support@google.com, and we will get back to you. So if you need a response, send an email, networkplanner-support@google.com, or if you just want to submit a bug real quick, you can do that using that question mark feature at the top of the screen. We're getting to the end of our hour, and I want to cover just a few more things. So I don't usually go over, but this time we had a little extra stuff to go through, so I'm going to go over a few minutes. Sorry if you need to leave us at the top of the hour. You can come back and rewatch this complete replay at your leisure anytime by going and following that link that you clicked to get through to this demo today. Thanks for joining me live, but let me go back, hide my little camera here, and we'll go back and cover a couple of other things. On the left-hand side of the screen, there's something called overlays. Overlays lets you show things like coverage, or you can add KML files, for example, into an overlay. So if I want to, you can draw a polygon on your map. Oops. And now it will show as a project overlay. So you can use this to create search rings or things like that. We also have what are called reports. There are three different types of reports I'm going to show you real quick. The first is auto planning. Auto planning is a pop-up that you may have seen when you logged into the Network Planner. It's a way to essentially create a search ring and then put a bunch of sites in that search ring, potential site locations, and decide what combination of sites is going to give you the best coverage for the minimum number of sites that you want to build. So when you create a new auto planning report, you fill in the name of the report. I'm using this polygon that I just created, which is called Untitled 0. Unfortunately, I didn't have time to name the polygon, but that's that triangle here, the red triangle. You can choose your demand data the RSRP threshold, you need to provide coverage, things like the site cost, and then you add or upload a existing sites. You can the sites which are tagged for a particular search ring. So you add a tag for those sites, and then it will include all of those sites in the calculation for the auto planning. Now, this is all a super high level summary because essentially we don't have time to get into it, but all of the auto planning functionality is in the Help Center. It goes into great detail in terms of how to do an auto planning report. So I encourage you to go read that. And actually that's available here under the question mark here if you type auto planning in the search help. So you can go there to find out more about auto planning. Home accessibility is kind of similar to auto planning, except instead of calculating the best transmitters, we're going to calculate which receivers, which user locations are going to get the best coverage. So I've got home accessibility report here. To configure that on the right-hand side, we would upload the data set. The data set is the potential user locations. So unlike transmitters, we don't know where our users are. So what we need to do is upload that data set with the latitude and longitude of the customers or the street addresses of the customers that you want to serve, those locations that you want to provide service to. Once you've uploaded that data set, choose the buffer radius, usually something a little smaller, and then which coverage run you're going to base your study on, and then you can start the home accessibility report. Again, that is available in detailed documentation under the question mark here. But essentially what we're doing is letting you upload a list of customer locations and then say, are you going to be able to provide coverage to each one of the customers? The network planner will calculate that for you. And when you're done, it will give you that report and let you download that report. The last report we let you do is called Export Coverage. This is how you can save the coverage that's shown here on the screen. In this case, we're seeing the line of sight clearance for this particular transmitter here within this triangle. If I want to export that, I can, let's see, I thought I would, this has actually changed because I used to be able to choose the, I'm going to have to come back to you guys on this because, guys and gals, because this upload data set, I used to just be able to click this polygon, and now it's going to ask for a data set. I'll find out more about how that works. It's probably in the documentation, but that is also something that changed, and I didn't realize it. So I've got some homework before my next Network Planner onboarding webinar. These webinars happen every Tuesday. We generally do every other Tuesday. So I'm going to say that we're probably going to be not here next Tuesday, but here the Tuesday after that. And I will be back and I will tell you at that point how to actually do the coverage, I'll at least demo it. If you want to find out, you can go ahead and look in the documentation. I went way over time. Thank you so much, everybody, for joining me for this quick start overview of how to use the Network Planner. Appreciate your questions, and I will encourage you to ask any support questions you have. If you need, you can email networkplanner-support@google.com. We have help agents and consultants available to help you with your Network Planner questions. You can also submit feedback to the tool if you find anything that you need that you think would benefit from additional examination from our product team. Do that and send feedback to us as well. It is still in beta. We're still making changes. Obviously, a lot of changes have happened since just the last webinar in August. So appreciate your joining me live. Thanks again for being here and for being a user of the Network Planner, a customer of Google SaaS, and we'll look forward to seeing you again. If you've got more questions, you can join us live in 2 Tuesdays, or you can rewatch this video at any time. Subscribe to our channel. Give me a thumbs up. Subscribe to our channel if you found this useful and if you want to be alerted to more videos as they happen. Thanks, everybody, for being here again, and we'll look for you next time in 2 weeks for the next Network Planner onboarding video. Take care, everybody.